Hey there, and welcome to The Everyday Marksman, the podcast where it is all about tactical skills for living a more adventurous life. I'm your host, Matt Robertson, former military officer turned tech sector corporate grunt, now a shooting enthusiast, outdoorsman, father, husband, American, and your friend. I'm glad you could be here with me today because this is going to be a little bit different of an episode. You know what? I feel like I say that every week. We're trying something a little new because I'm reposting a live stream I did with my friend Ilya Koshkin, the Dark Lord of Optics, last week on his YouTube channel. So what I've done here is taken about the first 40 minutes of that 2-hour live stream, and I'm going to share it here for your listening pleasure. Now, the topic of the day is LPVOs and offset red dots and offset this and offset that. The gist of the conversation comes back to my interview with Jeff Gurwitch in the last episode, where we talked about his vision of the ideal modern rifle being an LPVO, low power variable optic, with an offset miniature red dot sight. Like he is saying that's the standard. And well, Ilya wanted to talk about that a little bit. So he brought in myself as well as Jacob, the Pro-Gun Millennial, both of whom are in the Everyday Marksman Discord, by the way. So be sure to sign up for our email list on the website, everydaymarksman.co, to get access to the Discord. And you can talk to all these guys to your heart's content. But I will leave links to both their websites and YouTube channels, respectively, in the show notes for this episode. But we had a good conversation for about 40 minutes. And as these kind of panel style informal conversations do, they tend to wander a little bit. And there's a lot of good topics in there. Now, there's going to be a part 2 to this conversation that's going to happen on my brand new live stream channel, which will be happening soon. We're going to bring Ilya back and talk about part 2 of the conversation being BDC reticles versus precision reticles. And as you all might remember from Jeff Gurwitch last week saying that BDC is the way to go. Well, I'm not so sure that's actually true. And I think we should have that conversation depending on the circumstances. All right, well, enough of that. I'm going to be quiet now and let you get to listening to the first half of my live stream with Ilya. I'll be back as soon as we get to that cutoff point where we switch to looking at all the comments. See you then.
So today I don't have a long pre-planned speech. I do have 2 guests. I have Matt, the Everyday Marksman here, and I will add him on momentarily. And I've got Jacob of Pro-Gun Millennial, who is also going to join me here. The topic today is going to be a sort of a discussion of why people are adding offset red dot sights to low power variable scopes and whether that is a better way to go or a fixed power coupled with an offset red dot sight. The reason I have these 2 gentlemen here is that they have something to say on the subject. Jacob wrote an interesting post on his Pro-Gun Millennial blog that I'm going to make fun of profusely. I generally fully intend to put Jacob on the spot as soon as I add him onto the live cast, and we'll see. But the plan is I'm going to let these guys sort of state their point of view, and then I will proceed trying to prove that I'm the only one who is always right. All right. So here is Matt, Mr. Everyday Marksman. I think you've seen him here before.
Yes, hello again.
And here is Jacob. You have not seen Jacob before.
Hello.
It's a good way to arrange this. No, I don't like this. Don't like this. How about this? Oh, this is. What do you think, guys? That's good. Or you want to? Do you want to look slimmer? I'm the only one here who wants to look slimmer.
Gotta show off them gains.
It's going to take more than fancy camera edits to make me look slim.
Which reminds me, Jacob.
Yes.
So I am going to. Before we go with the topic of the day, I am going to put on the screen your blog called Pro-Gun Millennial.
Yes, sir.
And at the very bottom of it, as I remember correctly, there's something there you said that I took a little bit of an issue with. Let me go find it.
Uh-oh.
And I will proceed to put you on the spot.
Mute button.
So I am looking at Jacob's article on this topic of today, LPVOs with offset sights. There we go. I found it. I'm going to share my screen. And you're going to have to explain this one, my friend.
I already don't like this. I already feel bad. I'm anxious.
Oh,
I'm sweating.
that's making somebody feel bad too fast, even by my standards. All right. Published by Sunshine Shooter. Not all gun owners are old, fat, white guys. So, as a representative of old, fat white guys, what do you have to say for yourself?
Hold on. Not all gun owners are old, fat, white guys. Not all gun owners care about anybody. So,
no, just the first phrase. What's the problem with old, fat, white guys? I'm an old, fat, white guy.
I'm not saying that all gun owners are. I'm just saying a lot of them are. No, whenever I was putting this, when I was writing
you
that,
don't have to explain yourself. There's nothing wrong with what you said. I just noticed it earlier today, and I figured I'm going to start poking fun of you. So
Ilya comes out of the gate
for this
on the
early
spot
on.
like that, and
you did made me feel bad.
Excellent. So my purpose for today is accomplished. I can go. I can go.
Cool.
All right. One more thing before we get on to the main topic of the conversation. My wife is in Israel for 2 weeks. So every once in a while, I will need to peek out and make sure my kids are not trying to explode Albuquerque or something like that.
Nice.
So you guys will have to hold down the fort.
All right.
Those damn kids.
Yeah, they're good kids, but they are. I know for a fact that they're genetically related to me. That makes me extremely uneasy. All right. Without too much further bullshit, I do that.
Wait, hold on.
I do that for the first few minutes to let people kind of join. Let's see. Who wants to do the opening statement on low power variables with red dot sights? And why it's a good or bad idea?
I think Jacob should start. He had a stronger opinion than I did.
Oh,
All right,
I wrote an article about it.
So I'm not the only one putting Jacob on the spot. Okay.
What? Gosh. How's the old saying go? If you don't see the idiot in the room, you are the idiot in the room. Yeah. So here's my opinion on low power variable optics. I like them. I think that they are a good instance where the industry has actually made a lot of improvement in the last 10 years, 15 years, something like that. I don't know, like in recent history. Like we haven't made very much progress in metallic cartridges or like some in barrel steel, but not a whole lot. But like when it comes to low power variable optics, the industry has really created a brand new niche of optic that didn't exist 20 years ago. And not only have they created it, but they have progressed it rapidly to a high degree. And I think it's wonderful. The thing that makes an LPVO different, the thing that makes it interesting is the fact that it goes all the way down from 1x, from basically a red dot, up to now they're pretty high magnification, like an 8 or a 10 power. The fact that you can go from 1x all the way up to 8 or 10, and then all the way back down in just as long as it takes you to come off the gun, spin the ring, get back on the gun. That's crazy. That's a level of capability that just flat didn't exist 15, 20 years ago, to my knowledge. My problem is when somebody takes this wonderful optic, this wonderful concept, and then they take a red dot and they stick that on the side of it at a 45, and they just crank the thing up to its max magnification and never engage the part of the scope that actually makes it interesting. It's like, if you're going to do that, just get a fixed 8, a fixed 10, or a fixed 6 power optic. It'll be lighter, maybe cheaper, more robust, like theoretically. And then you can have your offset red dot on the side. Like, why do we have 2 optics that are both really good at 1x on the same gun at the same time? That's where my problem isn't even with the LPVOs. It's with the red dot on the 45.
Okay.
That's my thing.
All right. Matt, you want to add 2 cents before I make him feel bad again?
All right. So the counterpoint. I think this all came about because I interviewed Jeff Gerwich.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that gave me an idea, and then I saw Jacob's article.
So I interviewed Jeff Gerwich, and I asked this because This is my second time interviewing him, and this topic came up the first time, and I didn't go after it. So I was like, I'm going to ask it this time. And he got what I thought was a pretty cogent answer. But the bottom line was that from his perspective, he was in Iraq and Afghanistan, when VCOG was the thing, and he was on the teams. He left his VCOG on 6X the entire time, and then when he needed the 1X, he just did the rifle, and he trained himself instinctually to just go to 1X because that was faster than reaching up and grabbing the throw lever. So when I asked him, then why not go just to a prism scope or something like that? His answer was, well, redundancy, because if he's going to have the LPVO and the red dot on there, he's probably not going to have iron sights. So that gives him two options for zero magnification shooting. His primary one would be the red dot, just because it's faster. The secondary one would be zooming down to 1X if he knew he was going into that situation where he needed the 1X. But his argument was, you don't always know what you're going into. Like if you know you're going into the house, sure, you can zoom it down. But in the middle of a fight, you're probably not going to be like, oh wait, zoom that one down and then go now at my close distance. So his was about redundancy, having two ways of getting no magnification. And I think I agree with that, with some caveats, but we'll get to those.
Okay. So that is so Jeff has a very salient point there, I think. I'll add a couple of things to what both of you guys said. And then we'll do this. After this, we'll glance at the comments real quick to make sure we don't anything fall too far back behind, and then move on to kind of the next aspect of this. To what Jacob said, why not just use a fixed 6, 8, 10 power scope? Several reasons. Some of them technical. Most of the AR-15 specific or intended for AR-15 rifle scopes out there are fixed power rifle scopes, are prismatics. There is a funky thing with prismatics is that if you're trying to go to high magnification and have decent field of view, the prism becomes ginormous and the whole thing becomes heavier than that low power variable, and it becomes big. And if you try to have a conventional rifle scope, it starts getting pretty long and fairly unwieldy. It's not necessarily lighter, and it jives much worse with clip-ons and things like that. Now, I am actually running this experiment now. Here is a 10 power US optics scope that I'm setting up to run with an offset red dot as a comparison to an LPVO. I think it's going to be a very interesting study. And I have two different 10 power scopes, the really fancy US optics and the $400 SWFA that's actually lighter. It's a nice scope. I'm going to set both of them up with offset red dots and do some experimentation. But fundamentally, if you're looking at this from a system level point of view, by going with a fixed power scope like that, you've gained some low light. So on high magnification, it's actually going to be better. But you have not gotten back any weight. You do end up working with a bulkier system. And what leads to the next point is you've lost a good amount of flexibility. And here's what I mean by flexibility. Jeff Gervich's point that you Matt conveyed about redundancy is a huge deal generally, but we always have to kind of keep in mind that when we talk about low power variables and fighting with the gun and all that, we keep on thinking about either gun games, 2-gun, 3-gun, whatever, or we're thinking about going to Iraq. If all goes well, none of us here are going to go to Iraq anytime soon. Matt is out of the service. Jacob, I don't know if you served. I haven't, don't intend to. And I'm willing to put in a significant amount of time and effort to never go to Iraq or Afghanistan or any of those. What is our use for low power variable optic, right? And the concept of the low power variable optic sort of comes down. The original development was driven not just by 1X. 1X is a huge deal, right? So if you don't need 1X, you don't need to worry about low power variables. But the big thing is, and once again, this is one of the things that came out of, was very well explained by Jeff in that podcast. If you guys haven't listened to it, go on Matt's website, Everyday Marksman, listen to his recent podcast with Jeff Gervich. One of the things that Jeff was saying is that you can't prepare for every eventuality. If you prepare for a specific scenario, you're going to miss something. You're going to be hit with a scenario you were not prepared for. A low power variable scope for a fighting gun, for an AR-15, AK, whatever, is a general purpose setup. You can add stuff to it if it makes one specific thing better. Let's say offset red dot sight to make it slightly faster, whatever else. But fundamentally, of the sighting systems that we have, a variable magnification, 1:6, 1:8, 1:10, something like that, high quality, low power variable scope is the best we've got right now to face a situation that you're not expecting. Is making sense?
So far,
Jeff,
so good.
Yeah, Jeff Gervich in Iraq probably set up his VCOG on 6 power and had his red dot and all that. And if his red dot never failed, he'd never turn down the VCOG. Keep in mind, the VCOG is also not exactly the best LPVO on 1 power. What we have now is better, and not by a small margin. But that is one particular type of the scenario, and he still had redundancy. Even if God knows scenario changed to something he did not see, he had that flexibility of being anywhere between 1 and 6. I had this post on my website not long ago trying to figure out what magnifications people use. If everybody just sits on low power and high power with a low power variable scope, or if intermediate magnifications are used. In my use, the way I use them, with a 1:10, I spend a lot of time on 4 and 6, sometimes 8. Good amount of time on 10, lots of time on 1. But I don't have to have probably continuous zoom, but a scope that's like 1 and 3 and 9 would do it for me. But I spend a lot of time on 3 power for doing a variety of things, shooting offhand when I have a thermal clip on in front of it, variety of different things. I use different magnifications, different scenarios, different situations, different things I might do with a scope.
Okay. So I'll throw into that. So I think one of my caveats here is this very much depends on the optic. So for instance, my primary experience with LPVO is this one, which I ran for years. TR24 Trijicon fiber optic, 1:4. And this works really well for me, but it's only 1:4. And I think in the era now where we're getting to 1:8, 1:10, like I only ever ran this between either 1 or on 4, but when you have like the options up to 10, now you start seeing a lot more situations where, you may be hanging out at intermediate field, get better field of view for different situations. This works, but we've come a long way from this one too.
I will share something else on the screen. Just to make sure that you guys know I'm not exactly talking out of my ass. This is yesterday at the shooting range, 2 1:10s. Athlon Air CTR on the front and Razor Gen 3 in the back. My Razor Gen 3 is a pretty early version, and I've been shooting with it a lot. If I were to make a guess of between, let's say, 1 power, 3 power, 6, and 10, I use 10 the least. But I do use it, and I've taken it out to 1,000 yards with reasonable success and all that sort of stuff. Okay. ARS is pretty new to me, but my brother and I are going to go take a rifle class with these 2 guns and play with them and see how it goes. Okay. So so to Matt's point, with the 1:6s, and I went and asked a lot of people about this. For gun games, it was either 1 or 6. Very few people ever used intermediate magnifications, unless they were also using the same scope for let's say pig hunting or something like that. And once you put a clip-on on it, most clip-ons are not, at least the ones that normal people can afford, are not designed to be run on high magnifications, and native scope magnification for thermal clip-ons is between 2 and 4 power. Okay. All right. Anything you guys want to add, or should we take a look at the comments and then move on to the next subject?
I will say I had a LPVO for a while. And when I took it to a Desert Brutality match, I spent 2 days, and after the first, I spent 2 days with the optic. And
okay,
after
Jacob,
the
you're
first
frozen.
match,
I can hear.
I set it
there
on 2.5 power, and oops, okay. I had a 1:6 from Athlon, wonderful scope. I think I got the wrong reticle in it. But anyway, the point is, I set it to 2.5 power, and it lived on 2.5 power for the entire match. Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot because it wasn't a real long range match, but it really showed to me the what you can do with a relatively low magnification.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody has like a 1-6 and they never really like go very far out with it, I kind of start to wonder, like, does that person really have a need for that much power, or do they have a 1-6 because they think they need all that power? Now, like a 1-8, a 1-10, you can start reaching out real far with one of those.
Absolutely.
Or like you can start to make real accurate shots at even moderate distance with one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I like LPVOs. I just think that a lot of people over apply them.
I think that's probably, I mean, I agree. I think a lot of it is also that people are buying them because that's what everybody else is doing, and they don't have their actual use laid out of how am I going to use it. So like a 1-6 or even a 1-8 or 1-10, I can think in, Desert Brutality. I haven't run it, but I read your write-up on that one. Like, what was the furthest distance for that?
Maybe 75 yards.
Right. So 2.5 is actually really good because then you get the balance of speed and field of view. But like, take that out to, all right, I'm going to go to a carbine class, which goes out to 300 in the woods. You have to search, the behind the trees for targets that don't necessarily want to be found. Then it's really convenient to be able to spend that up and get that little extra time. Mm-hmm. Now, that said, I mean, combat scenarios being what they are, realistic tactics, you wouldn't be poking your head out long enough to like, oh, I'm going to find that guy back there. Like, that's not how that's going to work. But there is use to that magnification. That's where I totally agree that the future, I feel like, is in this versatility. But I think to bring us back to the original question, that's where I feel like that offset red dot is, or even offset iron sights for that matter, having that extra capability of, oh, damn, I need to take a close shot right frickin' now and go. That's where it gets really handy.
That's a very fair point. Over applied is an interesting argument, and I can't quite decide whether I'm on board with that or not. Because on one hand, a bunch of people are buying low power variables because it's trendy, and because they don't know any better. And for Desert Brutality, whatever else, I can make a really good case that this little 3-power prismatic with an offset red dot sight will do everything you need to do, and it's a lot less weight and bulk and all that sort of stuff. If you only shoot at places like that, right? Most people who buy low-power variable scopes can't tell their ass from an elbow. And now I just lost half of my audience, but they really don't know what they're doing. They have never taken a class. They only shoot at the range, and they go by that 1-8 Strike Eagle or some other generally underwhelming low-power variable scope, and it always sits on 8. And all they do is shoot groups from the bench at 100 yards. I've lived in California for 28 years, and the shooting ranges were full of these guys. On one hand, they don't need a low-power variable. On the other hand, their money is subsidizing the development of really, really nice 1-10s that I like to take to classes. If it wasn't for 90% of people buying cheap, low-power variables and not doing anything particularly interesting with them, if it wasn't for them, we would not have the nice stuff we have now. Right? And the downside of a low-power variable compared to a fixed-power scope at this stage in the game is mostly just weight and size. And for the vast majority of people who buy them and, like I said, don't do anything hugely interesting with them, it's not really a downside. Makes no difference. They never shoot offhand. They never move with them. It's just fun. It's just blinking. And if that's what it is, I wouldn't say it's over-applied, really, right? It may not be an optimal tool for the job, but given what they're doing, this particular job can be done with almost anything. So why not a low-power variable? Matt, you Matt, you're mute, I think.
It's like the phrase of 2020 and 2021. You're muted. I think there's a really thing to be said there about being optimized. And I think I'm absolutely guilty of this, as evidenced by some of the stuff that's on the wall behind me, of like thinking some wild ass scenario and I'm going to optimize for that. Like I need a rifle that's going to be great for 50 yards to 150 yards. And it's going to have this feature and this. And then it's like, I'm going to go build that. Why do I do that? Probably because I'm bored and I need to go out and train more. But I think there is definitely this risk of over optimizing for one scenario. And this goes back to what Jeff said versus more of a general purpose thing that's good enough at 95% of things you're going to face. And then don't worry about it. I'm not good enough to worry about that last 5% anyway. Like if you hand me an A2, 20-inch A2, tell me to go clear a house and then hand me a Mark 18 and clear a house, I'm going to suck either way. It's not going to work out. I'm not actually good enough to make a difference with that. But I think that's really easy to lose sight of that. And I think to come back to the over optimizing, sometimes something that's good enough in most scenarios is going to work well. And the more important thing is what you go actually practice doing with it, to Jake's point.
I wouldn't. Gosh, terrible time to lose my voice. I wouldn't disagree that like what normal people do can't be done with an LPVO. I just have the mindset of I want like maybe.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
Okay. Technical difficulties. No light.
did I freak?
Nope. Jacob, you are silent.
Did I come back?
You're back now.
All right. I don't know if I want necessarily the best, like most optimal setup, because like one thing I've noticed is the more specialized you get into one scenario, the worse you get at everything else. And that applies all the way until you're extremely specialized to the point where you can't do anything else. So I don't want like a super specialized item for something. It's just that I don't know. Maybe I'm just a natural born contrarian and I just see 1 to 6s, 1 to 8s being trendy and I just like automatically hate it. That's always a possibility. So I might be completely wrong on this.
You're going to go from the Pro-Gun Millennial to Pro-Gun Hipster.
Jacob, you should not be claiming that you're completely wrong. I mean, that's what I'm here for, to claim that you're completely wrong.
I'm
all
trying
right.
to steal your thunder.
Shame on you. So let's argue Jacob's point then for a little bit.
First, I think Jake needs to go get an OEG and tinker with that.
I'm going to need an explanation on that acronym.
So I talked to ARMS and they're sending me the OEG. I'm going to do an article on that and using conventional scopes. There's OEGs and all that since I've touched on that.
Going retro.
I wrote an article on OEGs, the guns of Sonte raid for Guns and Ammo a couple of years ago. So it's been kind of fun. And they do work surprisingly well if you don't have 4, if your visual system can handle it. I did build myself a retro AR-15 with the carry handle and all that, and fixed iron sights. Matt. And
respect. I couldn't make myself do it. I was like, I'm going to do an A1 upper. No, I did flat top.
I did an A1 upper with fixed front sight and all that sort of jazz and carry handle and everything. But anyhow,
just a good tangent. Part of me is like really wants to do that with a 12-inch SBR. But then I'm like, I'm wasting an SBR stamp on only iron sights.
I don't want to do it. So the way the story goes, Brownells has a bunch of these replica parts. So I wanted to build myself a retro AR-15 because I like these, long, skinny barrel type guns. I think they look cool. So I figured I'm going to buy the parts, and I pitched the idea to Guns and Ammo saying, okay, how about I'm going to build this AR? And I write it up, and I think, okay, it's going to cost me some money to buy all the parts. And then I'm going to get paid for the article. It's going to offset some of the cost, and I'll get a cool gun. I'll get to talk about it. It won't cost me that much. So my editor there liked the idea, reached out to Brownells. They sent me everything for free. So I got paid for the article and got a free rifle. So that was a good deal.
I'm going to try that for a project.
Yeah, go for that. But anyway,
so Jake, OEG, because I'm using an acronym. Are you familiar with that?
Do you know what that is?
I'm going to Google that one real quick.
Oh, is that the I know what that is now. That's like the red dot before it was an optic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
I know what that is.
Occluded eye gun sight, where in front of a dominant eye is just a red dot, but you're not actually seeing the target with dominant eye. You keep both eyes open, move fast, you can actually shoot quite quickly and surprisingly accurate for as long as you're moving. The moment you stop moving, it all goes to hell in a handbasket.
One of the modern ways of doing that one, I've tested this, is take a modern ACOG. I mean, because Trigicon grew out of Armson, I believe that was where it got started. But take a modern ACOG, cover over the objective lens, so it's just black with the glowing reticle, and do the exact same thing. That's where the
doesn't have to be an ACOG. You can do this with anything.
Yeah, with anything. That's where I think about it, because it's really bright.
So I do it occasionally when I have a high magnification scope. If there is a bright enough reticle, if it's dark outside, cover the objective, use it as an occluded eye gun sight.
Doesn't work so well for me though. I found I have that issue of
you have the offset's
pretty far. My offset's pretty far.
Yeah, mine is about this big, so it's minute of plate. It's totally fine. Anyhow, one more argument, and then let's look at the comments. I keep on showing this thing. This is a primary arms micro 3x prismatic. It's about $350. It's a surprisingly decent prismatic, decent reticle, decent illumination. Weighs about 8 ounces. I can add an offset red dot sight to it, about 2 ounces. Many smaller, cheaper red dot sights from Holosun and others you can get for $200, $250. They're actually quite robust. They work well. This is about $350 with a mount. So for about $600 and 10 ounces, I can have this set up. And the only thing I cannot do with this, as long as I am trained with the offset red dot sight, compared to low power variable, the only thing I cannot do is real longer distances. I mean, I'm used to shooting with low magnifications. I can take this to about 400 or 500 yards on man-sized targets, 18-inch plates, in reasonable comfort. Past that, it gets very sketchy, right? So $600, 10 ounces. And the only part of this flexibility argument I've lost is the long range. I've lost some of the redundancy, right? So I don't have one power with this. But if the reticle is bright enough, prominent enough, and if you know how to use the bin, the naming concept of the occluded eye gun sight, I can actually go pretty fast with this with 2 eyes open for as long as I'm moving. But I've lost some redundancy, which if you're not going to war is not that big a deal. And I've lost the long range, which except for some comparatively small number of specialized scenarios is not a big deal either. For most people out there who just dropped $2,000 on a Razor Gen 3 and $600 on Trigicon RMR, would it not be better to save that money, buy this, buy a simple red dot, and go take 2 classes?
And a bunch of ammo.
Ammo is overrated. You can try fire. Yes. Okay.
So
I think that's a great setup, and I'm probably gonna steal it. Should I ever go with my lightweight SBR? I might do something just like that.
You really should. So there are 2 of these compact ones. 3. There is Vortex and Burris, which I think are made by the same OEM. Primary Arms is different OEM. I actually like this one a touch more. I have a folding AR in a small case, so that I'm almost done testing something else on that, and then I'm going to set it up exactly with this tiny 3 power, right, and with a offset red dot sight. And one of the things I really want to test, I'm going to test this with a thermal clip-on, because 3 power works surprisingly well with most clip-ons on the market there. I've got a couple here right now. This is so short and so small that you do not need anything touching the handguard to set up a clip-on in front of this. Okay.
Now see, now you got my brain going, Ilya. I'm like, all right, I'm not just gonna do an AR. I'm gonna get a whole Brownells, and I'm gonna do one of their AR 180 and 300 black.
There we go. That's the spirit. They have a shorter barrel
in 12-inch SBR format.
Correct.
There we go.
So I just went hawk hunting, and one of the setups was a 300 blackout, a suppressed, a 10.5-inch barrel, a little longer than blackout needs, but good enough. Where I had the March Shorty because it's so short, and a Burris thermal clip-on in front of it, and everything worked great, and the whole overall length was short enough to work on a SBR or AR-15 handgun. With this, it's even shorter, right? And hunting with a thermal within 150 yards, I do not need more magnification. My variable scopes, I shot a 250-pound hog at 150 yards. The scope was sitting on 3 power. Guess what? 3 power. There's your 3 power. Okay. So here's your counter argument. Here's me arguing Jacob's point. Jacob, consider an apology for putting you on the spot earlier.
Apology accepted.
Excellent.
Know your use.
But it is a salient point. When we talk about fixed power scopes that are more like classic ACOGs LCANs, it's still a salient point. I mean, I love this LCAN that some years ago I think convinced Matt to buy. Yeah, right there, right behind him. Love this thing. It does not have an adjustable eyepiece. As I get old and decrepit, finish my transition into a fat old white man. Was that the phrase, Jacob? Something like that.
OFWG, old fat white guy.
Old fat white guy. So my ability to use this is going to come down. I'm going to use this for things like, I love this thing. This thing is awesome. It's still the best fixed 4-power scope ever made, as far as I'm concerned. All this new generation of Chinese prismatics have adjustable objectives. I can use this much longer than I can continue using this stuff much longer than I can LCAN. Lighter, smaller, cheaper. For the cost of one of these, I can have 3 of these. You want redundancy? There's your redundancy. Right? The only way to have a reliable optical setup is to have spares. I mean, there's no other way. Everything else is just statistics. Right. Anything that you guys want to add before we look at the comments for a minute?
I've been stalling enough. Let's get to it.
I had one thing. Ilya, this would be a question for you. On my article I recently posted, down at the bottom, I kind of bemoaned the lack of fixed power options, but one of which I did find is by Vortex. It's their Spitfire HD Gen 2. It's a 5X prism scope.
Yeah, I have one.
What? Let's say I was going to do it's called a 1:5 since we're talking about a 5X scope.
Mm-hmm.
The 5X, what is it again? Spitfire HD with the red dot on the side of that, or like at a 45 off of that.
Okay.
In your opinion, would there be much missing range in the middle between the 1 and the 5?
It depends on what you're looking to do, right? If you're not going to use a clip-on, there's going to be a little bit. Quite a few clip-ons out there don't like high magnification scopes looking through them. You start seeing pixelation on the screen and stuff like that. If you're not using the clip-on, it's not bad. For me, it's workable but not ideal because I spend a lot of time shooting offhand. And that happens to be one of the many shooting disciplines I truly suck at. And higher magnifications are not helpful. Up to 5 or so, I can shoot offhand adequately, but I tried it with a bunch of LPVOs. I can shoot offhand, slow fire standing on 3 power better than on 5 power, because on 5 power I see too much of my own shake, start compensating for it, and as I like saying, it all goes to hell in a handbasket. Okay.
That's true. I think that's true across the board, though. Like that could be high, like not even low LPVOs. That could be going to something like a 4-16. Like you're better off shooting at lower magnification if you can for that same reason.
Well, so when you have a supported shooting position, it's for me at least, it's somewhat less critical. When prone or bench or whatever, I tend to shoot. I do most of the precision shooting, for example, between around 12 to 14 power, 12 to 15, and a lot of my scopes go high up. And they go high up because I dial up and I look at the conditions and I dial back down to shoot. But if I happen to be on 18 or 12, I think I shoot a little bit better on 12, but it's not a big difference. Shooting offhand, when I'm trying to stay within my wobble zone and all that, it's noticeable. It is right there.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Then again, I know people who take a 1 to 10 scope, dial up to 10, and shoot standing, and they're totally great at it. More power to them. I can't do it.
I hate them.
Well, I've seen them shoot, so I'm not going to say anything negative on air, just in case. just for self-preservation reasons. I come from many generations of highly paranoid people. That's how Jews survived in Europe. So we did this not by pissing off people who can shoot really well from far away. I should probably stop talking shit about Todd Hodnett. Too much fun. All right. But anyhow, so Jacob, to answer your question, generally no. For general purpose AR use, if you are okay occasionally shooting from very wobbly positions on 5 power, there is really no downside. It's a perfectly respectable prismatic, and it does give you more range than 3. But remember, with prismatics, as you go to high magnifications, the whole thing gets bigger. This new Spitfire is not that big, but once the thing gets big enough and heavy enough, I might as well just get an LPVO and get that extra flexibility and all that.
Fair enough.
So I'm really drawn towards smaller prismatics because I do, aside from cost, I do gain something, and what I gain is handling. Right. All right, let's look at the comments, and then we'll see where that's.
All right, now there you have it. There was the first 38 minutes or so of my live stream with Ilya from last week, where we were talking about LPVOs versus red dot sights and offset irons. It was all a really good conversation. Now, we went on for about another hour after that to answer questions that the people were having in the chat, and I definitely encourage you to go check it out. I'm going to post that video in the show notes for this episode, as well as a link to the channel. But here's a question I would like you to let me know about. Drop in a comment, shoot me an email, do whatever. But do you like that kind of format? And the reason I ask is, as I promised many months ago, I'm about to start doing some live streaming myself, and my very first guest is probably going to be Ilya to pick up from this conversation as we talk about BDC versus precision reticles and rifle scopes. And I'm curious about what it is that you would like to see in a live stream, or do you like this kind of roundtable conversation format? I'm really just curious. I have my thoughts, but I'm also, wanting to know what you think. So swing on by the website, everydaymarksman.co, and drop a comment on this post. Go ahead and sign up for the email list so I let you know when I have new stuff going up live, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, take care, and I'll see you next week.